That was a painful one. When he was wearing a hood, I thought, oh my word, this is just a disaster.
What was happening there?
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel in association with Racing TV. Andrew, a little bit more time in London. Have you settled in well?
I have settled in quite well. I had the first week of work last week.
What's it been like? It's
been very good, and I do say this genuinely, that I'm actually looking forward to work, which is a great thing. It was something I was a little bit dubious, obviously starting off a new job, Don't know what you're to expect. First day I went in, there was around 22 screens I was looking at. I'm no tech expert, but I was managed to get it down right. And if everyone's looking at the little kind of highlighted bits on the Friday Club last week, all me.
That was all you?
All me.
You are a technician. How do you find living in London in general?
Yeah, no, not too bad. It's different from home. I'm not going to lie about that. It's a bit more high buzz. Also, you don't really get a smile from somebody on the street. You know, like back home, you know, you might give somebody a nice smile and they'd smile back at you. I'm smiling at people. They're looking at me like I'm a fruitcake.
Yeah, no, that can happen sometimes. Also, you can bump into some random people sometimes. We went to a pub yesterday and Sam Fender was in there.
Yeah, well, this was an organised coup from you to get to Sam Fender, because you saw an Instagram story from him, obviously a good singer, and you saw
one of my favourites.
Then you were piecing together where it could be. Then I wasn't working, you were in work, so you sent me off to be like the bargaining tool, even though I don't know who Sam Fender is. So I was looking around this place thinking, he's not here. But then you rocked in. We were up at the bar and there's Sam buying around, and to be fair, now you talked to him more than I did, but he was very, very nice.
Moving on, we are going to be talking about all the racing that happened this weekend, some interesting talking points, possible angles towards Cheltenham, as well as looking ahead to some big talking points, the Willie Mullins Novices. That's always a difficult subject to tackle. And we decided this episode is the one to try that.
Well, I think we have to. We've got to try and piece together something or other. I'm seeing an awful lot of different, I suppose, opinions and circumstance on Twitter at the moment in regards to both the novice hurdlers and novice chasers. It seems to be a year-long problem with Willie Mullins, where we don't know where any of these horses are going to end up going. But I think this year feels even more harder than usual, and I think that's really clouding over a lot of these anti-post markets as well.
Yeah, and as it is an earlier upload this week, it's coming on a Tuesday, we've actually got some fancies for midweek racing. We will have a video later on this week looking ahead to the weekend. Obviously, Grade 1 action at Ascot, so we're looking forward to that immensely. But let's kick on then, and we'll look at Warwick, which is where I was on Saturday. Thanks very much for everyone for coming and saying hello. And if you do enjoy this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and do get your comments down below. We hit 500 likes the last twice. We have to make it third time lucky, don't we?
But you got to get three points in a row. We're a team riding the wave. We're like Unai Emery's Aston Villa. We're riding the wave currently.
Riding the wave. One horse who was extremely impressive, I thought, was Galia Des Liteaux for the Skeltons in the Hampton. Obviously, the race probably wasn't the strongest it's ever been. I remember Black Hercules coming over and winning that race a good few years ago, went on to win the JLT at the festival. Galia Des Liteaux went from the front, a very aggressive ride under Harry Skelton, and just pinged them all.
Yeah, no, it was a really fantastic performance, actually. A really good jumping performance. And I suppose we've seen plenty of these Skelton novice chasers over the last few years at Warwick put in that type of a performance. It's funny because they say Kempton didn't suit her at all. And yes, I kind of don't really know why, because there's a big emphasis on jumping at Kempton, but she just made a couple of mistakes early on and the race was over before it even started, really. I don't know where you go with her, to be honest. You know, they were talking about maybe if it was really deep ground, they would go to the mare's chase. I don't see that happening personally, but I don't know how they're going to pick apart the rest of the season. Would they end up in the 3 mile Grade 1 novice chase at Aintree? Maybe they give that a spin with the mare's allowance. She may well be up to running okay in a race like that. I was intrigued by the race, though mostly by a horse that finished actually in the end quite well beaten. And I'm just not sure what they're doing with the Goffer at the moment. I think he's a horse of ability. He's tied in with some good horses back home. He's had 4 runs over fences now. He went into the race on Saturday with an official English mark of 146. Now, you'd think based off how he's run, he'd be knocked a pound or two for that, which would open the door for a Kim Muir. If it doesn't, wouldn't surprise me if he ran in a national hunt chase. And just if you took out a Galia Des Liteaux, if, say, for instance, he ran in the 3 mile race, the national hunt chase doesn't look much of a race then, and he may be one to keep the right side of.
Yeah, I like him. I think if they could get him off 145, he could go Kim Muir. And I think he's got that class edge. I think if we look at last year and the horses that we're looking at for the Kim Muir, obviously there was a couple in there that you really loved.
Yeah, there was Smoking Gun being top of that list.
They didn't seem to have the class of the Goffer.
No, he like Smoking Gun was a proper just average handicapper.
Yeah. Well, the Goffer I think could be a bit better than that. It'd be interesting to see what happens. With Galia Des Liteaux, I'm not sure she'd act as well on quick ground. I don't think she'd be completely against it, but I do think heavy ground is where you see the best of her. Moving on then in the card, the Leamington Novices Hurdle was also won by the Skeltons, and Grey Dawning won for the best bets. Won pretty well, was off the bridle, I think, the first out of the front three that finished the race, but stayed on stoutly. The Dan was saying afterwards, if he was going to run at the festival, it would be the Albert Bartlett. I got that impression too. I think he is a 3 miler, although I'm just convinced with him that he's still a bit raw and we won't see the best of him until next season, where he could be a Grade 1 novice chaser.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I would make it. He just screams to me one of those horses that if he went and ran actually in the Albert Bartlett, I'd give you short odds that he wouldn't even complete the race. You know, they did it with Beekstown. They went to the Ballymore after winning the Leamington and he kind of bombed out. He was just an immature horse at the time. He reminds me of that. Now, I was hearing a lot of stories about you on Saturday with your celebrations. I would hazard a guess. I've been saying for the last few weeks, the 29th of December this year was one of my best ever days racing. Goodland won for the good people of Leopardstown. There was loads of cheering, loads of celebration. And then everyone seemingly that came up to me that day had backed the horse. I got the impression you had similar vibes with Grey Dawning.
It was similar. I spoke to a lot of LTR listeners and viewers at Warwick on Saturday, and the one horse that I think what happens when I go to the racing now is I bump into plenty of people that watch the podcast.
Yeah, you have to have one horse.
You have one horse in the locker, and the one horse I gave everyone was Grey Dawning. And when that horse goes and wins, it's just the best feeling in the world. I can't explain it. He went and won. Yeah, he's one of my favourites already. I think he could be quite smart over fences next year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think he could be a proper graded horse next year. I'd be interested if they skipped Cheltenham and went straight to the Sefton. I'd give him maybe a squeak in that, but I wouldn't have him at Cheltenham at all.
I think the interesting thing with him is the Skelters last year had a good staying novice hurdler in Ballygriffin Cottage. I think Grey Dawning could be quite a good bit better than him and maybe a bit classier.
Yeah, he's a different type of horse, I suppose. Ballygriffin Cottage is a really slow horse. You know, he's a good horse, but he's a proper, 3.5, maybe even 4 mile horse down the road. As for Grey Dawning's got a bit about him. You know, he's obviously got the speed to have competed in 2 mile bumpers. He won a 2 mile novice hurdle earlier this year and just seems to be getting better the more and more he goes up in trip. But he is still raw, and I just hope that they maybe look after him this year.
7 ran in the Pertemps qualifier later that card. And Glimpse of Gala won, Ashtown Lad was second, Level Never Ending was third, and Lieutenant Rocco was fourth. 4 horses that qualify for the final at Cheltenham in March. Any of those going to win it?
No.
There we go. I disagree. Out of all 4, which one do you give most chance to?
I really wouldn't give... I just think Level Never Ending's an interesting horse, but at the same stage, I remember going to Kilbeggan back in June, and he got absolutely stuffed by a 50 to 1 shot, rated 85. So I kind of have a bit of bad memories about him. I thought the winner was given a great ride, but he's never going to win at the... Glimpse of Gala is never going to win it in a Pertemps final. Ashtown Lads really just looking at the national backwards, and... You know, maybe Level Never Ending's the most encouraging of those 4, but wouldn't be for me.
No, I completely agree with that. I don't think we've seen the Pertemps winner run this weekend. At Fairy House on Saturday, we had 3 interesting runners that we do want to talk about. The first being Blood Destiny, who's now second favourite for the Triumph Hurdle. Very impressive, visually very impressive. Do you think the race was very strong?
It was hard because on paper it is strong, but at the same stage they were doing a bit of an after you Claude in behind. I don't think that there's a few of those horses in behind that will run in the Boodles, and they didn't want to touch Blood Destiny. That being said, he's a professional horse for a juvenile. He jumps slick, he travels well. I was impressed with him down in Cork. Hard not to be impressed on Saturday, and he's now got a proper chance in that race. Will he beat Lossy Mouth? Hard to know.
No, Jazzy Matty was down the field. He looked a big, strong 4-year-old and one possibly for the Boodles. I know he had a lofty reputation before moving to Gordon. I remember we watched his run in France because it was largely expected that he would move to Gordon afterward. I think Cobwell Construction had already bought him, and he is developing into a smart juvenile without being a top-notcher. With regards to Blood Destiny, I know you've touched on it there. How far off do you think he is to Lossiemouth? And is it just a case of that £7 mare's allowance? It's just that's the tricky part with the Triumph.
Yeah, I think so. And I know people will say that mares don't have a great record in the Triumph in recent years, and that is something to bear in mind. But at the same stage, the two runs Lossiemouth has had this year, like she went by Dublin and back at Fairyhouse to win. She was that far wide, and she pulled like anything at Leopardstown and still hit the line hard. I think the horse that finished second that day, the Kenny Alexander mare, is probably a decent enough type as well. So Blood Destiny, I think, has gone and proven himself to be very much second best in that market, but he is going to have to go and improve probably a little bit more to be able to give Lossiemouth £7 based off what we've seen so far.
Another impressive Willie Mullins winner was Impaire Et Passe. Jumped brilliantly in the Moscow Flyer, but didn't beat much, really, did he?
No, he didn't. Look, I would just have a little bit of a quirk with this horse that the Model Kingdom was still on the bridle around 5 yards before the last, having a crack. I think it's a really, really nice horse. I think he's an absolute nag potentially for the Turners next year. He's that type of horse. He's a good jumping, really exciting looking chaser in time. I just think he screams a Ballymore horse. Like, I really do. And that's not with any bias. I haven't backed any horse in the Supreme. I haven't backed any horse in the Ballymore. And, well, I've backed American Mike in the Ballymore, but that's no use to me. But, like, it's with no kind of money that I'm saying this. I just think he's a 2.5 mile horse.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Willie Mullins' comments afterwards suggested that probably is the case as well.
Yeah, it was a very funny quote, though. He told us everything but told us nothing at the same stage. He kind of went, this horse probably does need a step up in trip, but there wasn't much pace on Sunday and he won over 2 miles, so he could stay at 2 miles. You're there going, Willie, you're not helping us at all here. I just think, I still don't believe this idea that Facile Vega's not going to run in the Supreme. And if that's the case, they're hardly going to run Impaire Et Passe against him. They'll run something against Facile Vega, but they won't run as good a bullet as Impaire Et Passe.
I'm sorry, I did skip over 2 horses at Ferryhouse on Saturday. One being Flame Bearer in the 2 mile, 1 furlong beginner's chase. He was much better this time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he jumped slick. He made a bad mistake at the last, but that can happen. He was out on his own forever. I think he's going to go down the Gentleman to Me route. I doubt he'll run at Cheltenham this year. There's a graded race at Thurles a couple of weeks before the festival. He could run there, and I think he'd be a really strong horse to keep on side at either an Aintree or a Punchestown or something like that against horses that have maybe had hard races at Cheltenham. I think he'll win a Grade 1 this year, but I don't think he'll even run at the Cheltenham Festival.
You quite like the Mullins bumper horse, didn't you?
Yeah, I just thought he was a bit of a loony, to be honest. Like, he was giving Patrick Mullins a terrible time of things, but he yanked Patrick Mullins around for 1.7 miles of that race and still hit the line strong. I think he's a good horse. Again, you're like looking forward in terms of a champion bumper prospect. I'm not sure because he's raw, he's green, but it didn't kind of not fill me with the same vibes I got from Dysart Dynamo winning a bumper a few years ago, where he kind of pulled, reefed and looked raw and a bit ignorant, but at the same stage there's a lot of ability there.
Yeah, that was Westport Cove. And then finally, touching on the weekend, going back to Punchestown on Sunday, Impervious beat Journey With Me over 2.5 miles. Very, very likeable performance, I thought. Really put her head down and ran to the line.
Yeah, absolute disaster for me, this, because she's going to take some stopping in the mare's chase. And Scarlet and Dove would have been one of my strongest bets of the year, really, for the mare's chase. But this horse is very, very good. I thought Journey With Me put in a really good performance, actually. I thought he jumped well. He stays well at 2.5 miles. And Rachel Blackmore gave him a very canny ride from the front. And yet still this horse picked Journey With Me up pretty easily in the end. Only hands and heels riding. And I just sensed there's more there. The only thing I would like to see, I don't know what the situation will be, because Mark Walsh is injured at the moment. I really would like Brian Hayes to keep this right. He knows the mare inside and out, knows exactly when to play her. And I think it would be a hindrance to her chance. Nothing against Mark Watt. Mark Watt, obviously a terrific rider, but you would want Brian Hayes on her at Cheltenham. He's the man that knows her the best and rides her the best, and I think she's got the best chance with him on board.
Now moving on to big talking points, and we thought we'd tackle the Willie Mullins novices first, the novice hurdlers and the novice chasers. We'll stick with the novice hurdlers first and try and work out which horse is going to run over which distance at the Cheltenham Festival. We'll go 2 milers. I've got 2 in there. I've got Gaelic Warrior and Facile Vega in the 2 mile division.
You've Gaelic Warrior to run in the Supreme?
I do, yeah.
Dear, didn't see that one coming.
No, I didn't. But then I look at it, and I think with Willie's comments about Impaire Et Passe possibly going up in trip to see him at his best, I think where is Gaelic Warrior going to run? Because in my head, I've got Champ Kylie and Impaire Et Passe going to the 2.5 mile race. Would Willie want to chuck a third in there?
No, the only thing I'm still not sure about, though, with Willie is that I do look at it and go, well, who's he running in the Albert Bartlett? And
is he not just going to chuck the Madman's Game and all of those in that race?
Yeah, but they've no chance of winning the race. He won't want a Grade 1 novice hurdle going and doing the rounds without him having a decent chance in it. And I must say, over the last day or two, and I'm not saying this by gospel, I wouldn't rule out in the slightest Champ Kylie rocking up in the Albert Bartlett.
Okay, do you think he'd have a chance?
Yep.
Interesting. So my 2.5 milers were Impaire Et Passe and Champ Kylie. Who are your 2.5 milers?
Well, see, I would have Impaire Et Passe and Gaelic Warrior. And I just think, because I think he'll end up running something that's okay, but not brilliant against Facile Vega in the Supreme. He could run Ilete Dump, a horse like that. No, I'm not saying this with Champ Kylie because the logical way for him to go would be the Ballymore. I'm just there thinking, he has actually nothing for the 3 mile race. I think at the start of the season you would have had Embassy Gardens, Madman's Game, Seabank Bistro. None of them have even won a maiden hurdle between the 3 of them. And I just fear, I feel that they'll have a Grade 1 3 mile novice hurdle. They'll want to run something half decent in it. And if he feels he's going to win the Ballymore, say with an Impaire Et Passe, well, why are you going to run Champ Kylie against him and Gaelic Warrior? He's got 5-6 horses that could run in the 2 mile, 2.5. And Champ Kylie's probably the most obvious of the lot of them to maybe give 3 miles a spin.
Moving on then to novice chasers. 2 mile division, I've gone Appreciate It, El Fabiolo and Dysart Dynamo. I think he might run all 3. Over 2.5, I've gone Sir Gerhard and James de Burley. And over 3 miles, Galia de Menil. I think he might run in the 3 mile race. Because, again, Willie's hasn't really got anything for it, which would leave Ramillies to wear the Donnelly Silks in the 4 miler. I know it's not the best option in the world. But Galia de Menil's won a Grade 1 over 3 miles at Christmas. Why shouldn't he run in the Grade 1 at Cheltenham? I know he's a shorter price for the 4 miler. I know he might have a better chance in that race, but Willie's got nothing for it, so surely he runs him.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. And I don't disagree with even Ramillies will run in the National Hunt Chase. I just couldn't have him for the race in the slightest.
The one that we said, or the 2 that we said that are interesting, or 3 possibly. I think El Fabiolo and Dysart Dynamo will run in the 2 mile race, we'd think.
I thought definitely. Yeah.
James de Burley, I spoke to Darryl Jacob. He came into the RTV offices and I asked him, what do you think? He thinks Turners. I think he'd be fairly strong. It'd be Turners. Said he's got plenty of speed. Now, I would have had Appreciate It in the 2.5 mile race, but this week there's been positive murmurs about Sir Gerhard and a potential run at the end of January over fences. Now, that doesn't mean he's definitely going to go to the Cheltenham Festival, but if you can get a run in before, and let's say he is mightily impressive and jumps well, I'd imagine he would turn up in that 2.5 mile race, which would they run Sir Gerhard and Appreciate It? Probably not. Appreciate It, then go to the 2 mile race.
Yeah, no, that's something I don't want to see, Josh. To be honest.
Is that something you've been thinking this week though, since you put Appreciate It up?
Yeah, it's not news I wanted to see. To be honest, I'm really hoping that the entries keep coming out and Sir Gerhard keeps not being in them. If I'm being brutally honest, but because I think for him to run in a Grade 1 novice chase at the festival, he's going to have to win a beginner's chase between then and now. So you're going to have to see him out in the next 3-4 weeks, I would say. The last cut-off would be maybe the 10-up day at Navan, which is mid-February. If it's after that, he's got no chance of turning up. They seem to have gone 50-50 with that horse. One day we're being told there's no chance of him running at Cheltenham. The next day he's flying at home. You wouldn't know what's actually happening with the horse at the moment. He's a horse you want to see. He's a really good horse, and I think you'd take the world of beating in the Turners if he turned up A1 and he jumps well, but you're taking an awful lot on trust.
Well, looking at that list that I've put together, would you change it at all?
It completely depends and hinges on Sir Gerhardt's fitness, because I don't disagree. I think that's absolute on the money if Sir Gerhardt's fit. I think the only adjustment is if Sir Gerhardt isn't fit. I do believe appreciation.
I'd agree with that as well. Yeah.
And then you just have the 2 at 2 miles and the 2 at 2.5 miles. I agree with Galia Des Liteaux being in the 3 mile race. Like they're running him in the 2.5 at the Dublin Racing Festival. That's not a great sign that you're going to rock up in a national hunt chase. If he goes anywhere close in that race, it would almost be an insult to go to the national hunt chase. And like Ramilli's, I suppose, like he wouldn't be for me in the national hunt chase, but he's got absolutely no chance in the 3 mile race. So you might as well give him a try at the big trip.
And could you also, I know we've not seen him since his beginners, but Classic Getaway, could he turn up in a 10-up or something like that and go national hunt chase or even 3 mile race?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know what to say about him. He's the type of horse that I wouldn't necessarily mind if he just suddenly turned up straight at Cheltenham. I feel if he went and ran in a 10-up, he's a fragile horse that could completely knock the stocks off him, because it's usually heavy ground, middle of February, and no different to when you win the Ascot Chase or the Reynolds Down or something like that. You're absolutely poleaxed for the festival then. So there's a part of me that thinks if you really liked Classic Getaway, I wouldn't mind him actually going straight there.
I know we touched on this previously before, but Impervious, where would you go? Next topic of the talking points. Would you go mares or would you go to the Turners?
I don't think she'd be out of place in a Turners, to be honest. I said to you after the race that I didn't see her out of the 3 and the Turners getting £7.
Yeah, she'd obviously get that vital £7.
Yeah, and instead she's going to have to, I think, carry a penalty now in the mares chase. Now, that kind of makes no real sense, because I think any of the useful mares are all going to have to carry the same penalty. I think Scarlet and Dove, Allegory Devassi all have to carry it, so it kind of becomes null and void. I think that's the race that she's got the most likelihood to win. I must say, I know she looked impressive down in Limerick and stuff like that, but I'd be really, really keen to take on Allegory Devassi in the mare's chase at the moment. When you've got the likes of Impervious and Scarlet and Dove running for you, you've got 2 proper bullets to be taken on a pretty skimpy fav with.
I think I'd just about stick with her.
No, you see, you don't learn, though, Josh. This was the exact same last year, and I was there going, you have to give Ellie May a chance. Oh, Concertista, she won at Limerick, and she jumps low, and all of this. And she just absolutely thumped 4 fences around Cheltenham.
I just think on hurdles form, Allegory Devassi's in a different league to these two.
Yeah, but Scarlet and Dove ran, only a handful of times over hurdles, and it was years ago. And Impervious, I think everyone would admit, has been a better mare this year than she showed last year.
I would agree. I just think Allegory Devassi could be a proper Grade 1 mare. I'm not sure the other two are. Then the final topic of conversation is the champion bumper picture. I think Queen's Gamble is set to run at Market Raisin on Friday. She leads the way in the market, possibly at the moment.
Yeah, I think she's joint fav with that Chapeau de Soleil. To be fair, she's a better fav than him. At least she's won a couple of races and won them impressively. I looked briefly at the original entries for that Alan Swinbank race, and well, if she can't win that, she's got no chance at a champion bumper. I'd have thought she'll win pretty impressively. It's just interesting. I wanted to bring this up because I know we said it at the time, and I said categorically at the time that it wasn't something I'd be interested in. And it's not something I'm going to back now. But the more and more this season goes on, I'm not impressed by this bumper lot. I think it's been a really average year. Mullins hasn't seemingly had anything. All 3 of, I'd say, Gordon's top 3 bumper horses all bombed out in the same race at Leopardstown. I hate to bring up bad memories. I backed King of Kingsfield myself, but that didn't go to plan. And I know he's not fashionable, and I know it's going to be a long ask that he wins a champion bumper, but I do look at Encanto Bruno and go, he's actually achieved at least a fair bit. Like, the bumper he won was actually a good piece of form. And as I say, I won't back him now because he'll be double figures still on the day, because people will say John McConnell can't win the champion bumper. And I do get people that say that. But, like, it's not exactly like there's a whole list of alternatives.
King of Kingsfield definitely won't be winning it. That was a painful one. When he was wearing a hood, I thought, oh my word, this is just a disaster.
What was happening there?
I don't know. I really don't know. I just want to forget that one and move on. Was wrong about that. Unfortunately, you have to hold your hands up sometimes and just admit that you're wrong. And I was.
It wasn't as bad as Wrexham, to be fair.
No. We've both had a couple of moments this season, haven't we?
Yeah, well, we've had one or two each, actually. We've still got one or two real live ones in that Cheltenham Anti-Post series, but there's been one or two absolute ditchwaters.
Yeah, we definitely agree with that. Right, let's move on to best bets of the day before we wrap the video up to best bets for the start of the week. I've got two. One's not really a tip, just a horse to look out for, and that's Night and Day in the first at Clonmel tomorrow, if it goes ahead. I think she could be a sneaky one in the mares at Novices Hurdle. I know I mentioned it at the back end of last season. She's definitely a mare to follow. Night and Day could be very interesting. I expect her to go and scoot in the first. And then my only one best bet for the week would be Hartour Duderies in the 250 at Newbury, 9-4 on Wednesday. I think he could just go and win, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I said it to you just before we came on that I was a big fan of Hartour Duderies. He'd have been in my two as well. And I like a horse running at Clonmel today as you're watching it. And the 2 mile handicap hurdle, a horse called Gowan Tig for Eddie O'Grady, Darragh O'Keefe. Around the 7-2 mark. Ran an eye-catching race, I thought, the last day at Cork. Seems to be improving. Eddie O'Grady's horse is in good form. I think he's got a very good chance.
There we go. We do hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit that like button. If you did, if we could hit 500 likes, that would be super. Do let me know your comments down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We will see you soon.